The air in the departure lounge hung thick with the stale scent of caffeine, recycled air, and a faint underlying anxiety that seemed to permeate every traveler. My own anxiety was a familiar hum beneath the surface, a low thrumming bass line to the overture of utter exhaustion. I'd spent the last 3 weeks on the East Coast, holed up in conference rooms and hotel suites, pitching a design concept that was both groundbreaking and utterly draining. It had been a success, thankfully, but success, I was learning, often came with a hefty price tag of personal depletion. All I wanted was my own bed, my own space, and the quiet comfort of my apartment in California. My flight was the last leg of a cross-country journey, the kind that promised a brutal 8 hours in a metal tube, followed by a blissful, uninterrupted sleep. I was in no mood for small talk, no desire to engage with anyone beyond the necessary pleasantries. My brain felt like a sponge that had absorbed too much water, heavy and sluggish, ready to be wrung out and left to dry. As I shuffled towards Gate B12, my carry-on bag feeling heavier than usual, I scanned the boarding pass on my phone. Window seat. Perfect. I could lean against the fuselage, pull my eye mask down, and pretend the world didn't exist for the duration of the flight. My headphones were already charged, a meticulously curated playlist of ambient music awaiting its command to transport me away from the drone of jet engines and the inevitable baby cries. The boarding process was a blur of humanity, a slow-moving river of weary faces and expectant eyes. I found my row, sending A, and began the awkward dance of stowing my bag in the overhead compartment. As I wrestled with the latch, a hand appeared above mine, strong and steady, guiding my luggage into place with an ease I couldn't quite muster. "Need a hand?" a voice rumbled, soft but clear, right next to my ear. I straightened up, a polite smile already forming on my face, ready to offer a quick thanks and retreat into my shell. But then I saw him, my seatmate. He was tall, maybe a few inches over 6 feet, with a lean build that suggested more practical strength than gym-sculpted vanity. His hair was a rich, dark brown, slightly unruly, falling across a broad forehead. What really caught my attention, though, were his eyes. They were a striking shade of hazel, flecked with gold, and crinkled at the corners, as he offered a small, genuine smile. There was an easy confidence about him, a quiet assurance that was instantly disarming. He was already settled into the aisle seat, 17C, a well-worn leather-bound book open on his lap. "Oh, thanks," I managed, feeling a blush creep up my neck. "Yeah, that's heavy. Long trip." "No problem," he said, his smile widening slightly. "Looks like you're in the window. I'm Elias, by the way." He extended a hand across the middle seat. "Miles," I replied, taking it. His grip was firm, warm, and surprisingly gentle. "Nice to meet you, Elias." Our hands lingered for a second longer than strictly necessary, a fleeting connection that surprised me. I usually wasn't one for instant chemistry, especially not when all I wanted was oblivion, but there was something in his gaze, a calm curiosity, that pricked at my carefully constructed wall of indifference. I slid into my window seat, trying to look composed, my mind already doing a rapid assessment. Elias. Interesting name. He was dressed in a comfortable-looking pair of dark jeans, a soft gray Henley, and a worn denim jacket. Casual, but well put together. He radiated an approachable, grounded energy, and he read actual books. That was a point in his favor. "Heading home?" he asked, once we were both buckled in, the airplane cabin slowly filling with the last of the passengers. "Eventually," I chuckled, adjusting the pillow behind my head. "Coming from New York, long week of pitches. Just want to sleep for a week straight. You?" "California's home for me too," he said, turning slightly in his seat to face me more directly. "Visiting family in Boston, always bittersweet leaving, you know?" I nodded. "Definitely, I get that." We lapsed into a comfortable silence as the cabin door was secured and the flight attendants began their safety demonstration. I put on my headphones, but kept the volume low, more to signal I'm not looking for a deep conversation than to truly block out sound. Yet, I found myself stealing glances at Elias, who had returned to his book, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked good in profile, strong jawline, a faint stubble that somehow made him look more rugged than unkempt. As the plane taxied down the runway and finally lifted into the gray afternoon sky, I watched the city lights shrink below us, feeling the familiar pull of homesickness mixed with the weary satisfaction of a job well done. I closed my eyes, letting the hum of the engines vibrate through me. After about an hour, I stirred, feeling a gentle tap on my arm. Elias was offering me a small bag of pretzels. "Flight attendant just came by," he explained, his voice muted by my headphones. I pulled them down. "Oh, thanks," I said, taking the bag. "Forgot they even offered these." "You were out cold," he grinned. "Must have been a rough week." "You have no idea," I sighed, tearing open the bag. "Architect, late nights, endless revisions. It's rewarding, but man, it takes it out of you." "Architect, huh? That's cool," he said, genuinely interested. "What kind of projects do you work on?" And just like that, the conversation flowed. I found myself talking about my passion for sustainable design, the challenges of urban planning, the joy of seeing a concept come to life. Elias listened intently, asking thoughtful questions that showed he wasn't just being polite. He seemed genuinely curious. "That's incredible," he said, after I'd rambled on for a good 10 minutes. "I'm in education, actually, teaching high school literature, so completely different world, but I can appreciate the creative process." "Literature? Wow," I said, a smile tugging at my lips. "So that explains the actual book." I gestured to the leather-bound volume. "What are you reading?" "Faulkner, As I Lay Dying," he replied. "It's one of my favorites. Complex, but beautiful. There's so much to unpack in it." We spent the next couple of hours delving into books, movies, travel, even a bit about our respective families. Elias talked about his younger sister, a budding artist, and his parents, who had encouraged his love for storytelling from a young age. He had a way of speaking that was both eloquent and unpretentious, using words precisely but never showily. I found myself hanging on every anecdote, every shared laugh. He was easy to be with, easy to talk to, and completely captivating. His eyes, I noticed, held a particular warmth when he spoke of things he was passionate about, like the joy of seeing a student finally grasp a complex idea or the nuances of a particularly challenging piece of literature. It wasn't just physical attraction, though that was undeniably there, a steady thrum beneath my skin, an awareness of his proximity, the way his arm occasionally brushed mine when he reached for his drink. It was deeper. I felt a connection, a resonance with his spirit. That was rare for me. I usually guarded my internal world fiercely, but with Elias, the words just tumbled out. "So, what's your ideal vacation, Miles?" he asked at one point, stretching his long legs out into the footwell. "Honestly," I leaned back, considering. "Right now it's a cabin in the woods, no cell service, a huge stack of books, and a fire, maybe a dog." He chuckled. "Sounds idyllic. I'm more of a city person myself, but I appreciate the sentiment. I love exploring new places, getting lost in the history of a place, the architecture." He paused, his gaze softening. "Though a quiet evening with good company and a great bottle of wine isn't bad either." My heart did a little flutter. Was that a hint? Or just general conversation? I was so out of practice with this kind of thing, my romantic life having been on a permanent hiatus for the last couple of years. My last relationship had ended messily, leaving me wary and a little cynical about grand gestures or even subtle overtures. But Elias felt different. There was an honesty about him that was refreshing. We ordered a small bottle of red wine from the flight attendant. "A little something to take the edge off a long week, right?" Elias had suggested, his eyes twinkling. We clinked our tiny plastic cups together, a silent toast to unexpected camaraderie. The conversation flowed easily between us, punctuated by shared smiles and comfortable silences. I found myself revealing things about my hopes and fears, my past struggles, even, that I rarely shared with new acquaintances. He listened with an attentiveness that made me feel truly seen. I said, a few hours into the flight, feeling surprisingly invigorated despite the diminishing cabin air, I actually don't usually talk this much on planes. I'm usually the headphones on, eyes closed, don't talk to me type. Elias laughed, a warm, resonant sound. I get that. I'm usually the one buried in my book. But you're an easy conversationalist, Miles, and I'm glad we talked. His words, simple as they were, sent a warmth through my chest that had nothing to do with the mediocre cabin wine. The cafe cleared out a bit, the lunch rush not quite started, leaving us in a calmer pocket of the morning. I found myself sharing details about my work, my passion for the forgotten corners of history, even a little about my own quiet nature, things I rarely divulged to new acquaintances. And Liam, in turn, spoke of his design philosophy, his love for the raw beauty of natural materials, his recent move to the city from a smaller town seeking new inspiration. It's good to be here, he confessed, leaning back in his chair, a relaxed smile on his face. This city has a certain energy. I'm still finding my feet, figuring out my go-to spots. This cafe, definitely a keeper. He paused, his gaze softening as he looked at me. And meeting you? That's definitely a good start. My stomach did a small flip. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but I could feel a warmth spreading through me, a lightness I hadn't felt in ages. It was more than just polite conversation. There was an undeniable spark, a connection, humming beneath the surface. I'm glad you think so, I replied, my voice a little softer than I intended. I've enjoyed our conversation too. He held my gaze, and for a moment, the world outside the cafe seemed to fade. It was just us, suspended in this bubble of unexpected intimacy. The air felt charged, thick with unspoken possibilities. Then he leaned forward, his hazel eyes serious, a slight shift in his posture that signaled a change in the tenor of our interaction. His voice dropped a notch, a little more personal, a little less casual. Anthony, he began, his thumb absently tracing the rim of his empty mug. I have to ask. He paused, and I braced myself, my heart picking up its pace. Was he going to ask about my favorite type of historical document? My opinion on the current state of libraries? But that wasn't it. His eyes, warm and direct, met mine. Are you single? The question hung in the air, sudden and disarmingly direct. My breath hitched. It was the question I always dreaded, the one that usually led to a polite, "No, I'm just focused on my career," or a self-deprecating joke about my lack of a romantic life. But coming from Liam, in this moment, it felt different. It wasn't a casual probe. It felt like a gateway, an invitation. My mind raced. What do I say? Be honest. Don't overthink it. This is good. Yes, I managed, my voice a whisper. I am. A slow smile spread across Liam's face, a genuine, relieved smile that made my heart flutter. Good, he said, his eyes still holding mine. The word hung there, heavy with implication, a silent acknowledgement of the potential now laid bare between us. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached down to his waist. My eyes followed his hand, a primal instinct kicking in. My mind screamed, "What is he doing?" My carefully constructed composure threatened to shatter. This wasn't how these things happened, not in my experience anyway. My brain, ever the archivist, began frantically cataloging all the possible scenarios, most of them alarming. His fingers found the silver buckle of his belt. With a soft clink, he undid it. His gaze still fixed on mine, unwavering, almost challenging. He didn't take the belt off, just loosened it, pushing the end back through the loops, allowing his jeans to sit a little lower, a little looser on his hips. It was a gesture of unburdening, of making himself comfortable, or perhaps of revealing something. My breath caught in my throat. My body tensed, a mix of apprehension and a strange, thrilling curiosity. Was this a prelude? A suggestion? A physical manifestation of the intimacy we'd unknowingly been building for the past hour? My pulse pounded in my ears. I felt a blush consume my entire face, hot and undeniable. He leaned back again, settling more deeply into the chair, the now unbuckled belt a silent, potent declaration between us. The action, rather than being crude or forward, felt vulnerable, as if he was shedding a layer, becoming more open, more authentic in front of me. It wasn't about sex, not directly. It was about comfort, about ease, about a willingness to be completely himself. Or at least, that's how it felt to me in that moment, seeing the slight tremor in his hand, the depth in his eyes. Good, he repeated, his voice softer this time, almost tender. He met my wide-eyed gaze, and for the first time I saw a hint of shyness, a vulnerability mirroring my own. Because, he continued, leaning forward again, his elbows resting on the table, I wanted to show you something without feeling like I was stepping on anyone's toes. He then reached for his sketchbook, opening it to a page he'd been working on. He pushed it across the table towards me, the unbuckled belt still prominent, a silent testament to the shift in atmosphere. My eyes dropped to the page. It wasn't a landscape or a building. It was a portrait, a quick sketch, but undeniably me. My face, caught in a moment of concentration over my crossword, the slight furrow in my brow, the way my hair fell, the curve of my lips. It was a remarkably accurate and deeply flattering rendition. Below the sketch, in elegant, flowing script, he had written, "The quiet focus of a Sunday morning and the subtle beauty of a new discovery." My breath hitched again. The vulnerability of his action, asking if I was single, then unbuckling his belt, now made complete sense. It wasn't a come-on in the traditional sense. It was an act of genuine, heartfelt connection, a prelude to revealing something personal and intimate, a sketch he had created of me, a stranger, an homage to the quiet observation that had drawn us together. He hadn't wanted to present this vulnerable offering if I was unavailable. I looked from the sketch to the unbuckled belt, and then back to Liam's face. His eyes were wide with a hopeful anticipation, a gentle nervousness. He had laid himself bare, metaphorically and literally, by showing me this. "Liam," I whispered, feeling a tremor in my voice. The coffee shop, the world, everything faded away. It was just us and this beautiful, unexpected offering. My heart, which had been in a defensive lockdown for so long, felt a sudden, exhilarating surge of something I hadn't felt in years, hope, and a dizzying, potent sense of being truly, unequivocally seen. The click of the buckle was surprisingly loud in the hushed ambient of the bar. It wasn't a dramatic flourish, no theatrical flourish, but a deliberate, almost tender motion. Alex's fingers moved slowly, unthreading the leather from its loop, and then the belt itself, which he then set gently on the table between us. It was a gesture that stole my breath, not because it was overtly sexual, but because it was so unexpectedly intimate. My mind, usually a chaotic storm of self-doubt and overthinking, went completely blank. I just stared at the belt, then at his hands, then finally at his eyes. There was no leer, no predatory glint, just a quiet, intense gaze that held a question, an invitation, and perhaps a raw vulnerability I hadn't anticipated. His lips curved into a faint, almost shy smile, a subtle shift that softened the rugged edges of his face. "Comfort," he finally murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the air. Or maybe shedding a layer. He leaned back slightly, his posture relaxing, but his eyes never left mine. It's easier to talk when you're not held so tightly, wouldn't you agree, Anthony? My name, spoken with such gentle familiarity, felt like a caress. I swallowed, trying to find my voice. My heart was thrumming against my ribs, a frantic drum solo. This wasn't the aggressive come-on I might have braced myself for, nor was it the casual flirtation I was used to. This was something else entirely. A quiet declaration of intent, a request for honesty. I suppose so," I managed, my voice a little hoarse. My gaze flickered to the empty chair beside me, a a part of me wanted to bolt, to escape this intense, unfamiliar pressure. Another part, the one that had been yearning for something real, was utterly captivated. "It's quite a move, Alex." He chuckled, a warm, genuine sound that dispelled some of the tension. "Is it? I thought it might be. But I figured, why waste time on pretense? If we're going to talk about being single, about what we're looking for, then let's truly talk." He gestured subtly to the now unbelted waist of his jeans. "This isn't about, well, not yet anyway. This is about showing I'm willing to be uncomfortable, to take a risk, to be unbuttoned in a way that's more than just physical." The metaphor landed, resonating deep within me. We began the mundane tasks of settling in. I pulled out my toiletry bag, found the charging cable for my phone, and laid out a fresh t-shirt for the morning. Elias did the same, moving with a quiet efficiency. The rhythm of our movements, the shared space, it all felt surprisingly comfortable, like we'd done this before. "Are you hungry?" Elias asked as I finished putting away my few things. "Those pretzels were a long time ago. We've got those meal vouchers." "I could definitely eat," I admitted. "Room service, maybe? I don't think I have the energy to go find a restaurant." "Sounds good to me," he said, picking up the room service menu. "Let's see what culinary delights Salt Lake City has to offer at this hour." We perused the menu together, our shoulders occasionally brushing as we leaned over the glossy pages. We settled on a couple of burgers and fries and 2 sparkling waters. While we waited for the food, we sat on the edge of our respective beds, a comfortable distance separating us, but the connection between us still very much alive. "This day has been something else," I said, running a hand through my hair. "From thinking I'd be home in my own bed by now to sharing a hotel room with my seatmate in a city I've never been to." I chuckled, a genuine, tired laugh. Elias looked at me, his hazel eyes soft. "Life's full of curveballs, isn't it? Sometimes the detours are more interesting than the planned route." His words resonated deeply. I thought about my planned route, the carefully constructed walls I'd built around myself after my last relationship imploded. The detours, the unexpected, were things I usually avoided. But with Elias, this detour felt intriguing, not scary, not overwhelming, but brimming with an unknown potential. "Yeah," I murmured, meeting his gaze. "Sometimes they are." The room service arrived quickly, a polite knock breaking the spell. We ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, savoring the surprisingly good burgers. "So, what's your plan for tomorrow?" I asked, pushing my plate aside. "Just straight to the airport?" "That's the idea," Elias replied, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Though I wouldn't mind a quick walk around if there's time, see a bit of the city." "We probably won't have much time before our flight," I said, a slight regret in my voice. I was enjoying his company far more than I had anticipated. "Maybe next time," he said, his eyes twinkling. "If our paths cross again, perhaps we can actually plan a visit." Next time. The words hung in the air, a silent question, a hopeful possibility. I felt a blush creep up my neck again, a warmth spreading through me. Could there be a next time? Was he suggesting what I thought he was suggesting? "Yeah," I said, my voice a little softer than I intended. "I'd like that." We talked for a while longer about mundane things and more profound ones, slowly winding down. The day's exhaustion was finally catching up to me, but I felt strangely energized by his presence. "Well, though," Elias said eventually, stifling a yawn, "I think I'm going to call it a night. Long day and an early start tomorrow." "Me too," I agreed, stretching. "Shower first, then crash." "Sounds like a plan," he said, getting up from his bed. "Bathroom's all yours." I grabbed my toiletries, feeling the weight of the day, but also a quiet anticipation. As I stepped into the bathroom, the warm water of the shower a welcome relief on my tired muscles, I couldn't help but smile. This was definitely not how I had envisioned the end of my trip. It was messy, unexpected, and completely off script. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like a good thing. The thought of Elias just outside, in the same room, a few feet away, was a surprisingly comforting and intriguing presence. Tomorrow was a new day and a new flight, but tonight? Tonight was something entirely different, and I couldn't help but wonder what that something might turn out to be. The automatic doors of the hotel hummed open, ushering us into a lobby that felt like an oasis of calm after the airport's controlled chaos. Gleaming marble, soft lighting, and the subtle scent of something floral and expensive replaced the stale air of the terminal. We shuffled towards the reception desk, the awkward silence between us a thin, almost palpable membrane. We'd managed a few polite murmurs on the shuttle ride over, mostly about the unlikelihood of the flight delay, but now, facing the next stage of our enforced proximity, the words seemed to have dried up. "Miles Caldwell and—" the clerk asked, her smile professional but weary, scanning her screen. "Leo Maxwell," Leo supplied, his voice a low, pleasant rumble that cut through my internal monologue of wondering if this was truly happening. "Ah, yes. We have you both booked into a deluxe king room," she confirmed, her fingers dancing over the keyboard. My stomach did a little flip. A king room, singular. My brain, despite the exhaustion, was already running through the logistics. One bed, two guys. This was going to be interesting. Leo caught my eye, a small, knowing smirk playing on his lips. "Looks like we're getting cozy, Miles." I felt a blush creep up my neck. "Seems that way," I managed, trying to sound nonchalant, utterly failing. I was usually much better at masking my reactions, but the day's events, combined with Leo's easy charm, had disarmed me. She handed us 2 keycards. "Room 1407. Enjoy your stay." We rode the elevator in silence again, the numbers blinking overhead marking our ascent. The quiet was different now, infused with a new awareness. The earlier silence had been simply the quiet of strangers, but this was the quiet of 2 people, suddenly acutely aware of each other's presence, the unspoken question of the king bed hanging heavy in the air. When the doors chimed open on the 14th floor, we stepped out into a hushed hallway. Our room was almost at the end. Leo fumbled with his keycard, swiping it clumsily, and I noticed his hands were large, a scattering of freckles on the back of them. He pushed the door open, revealing a spacious, elegantly furnished room. And there it was. The king-sized bed, dominating the room, dressed in crisp white linens, looking incredibly inviting and impossibly intimate. "Well," Leo said, stepping inside, "this is luxurious for a forced layover." He tossed his duffel bag onto a plush armchair. I followed, dropping my own bag near the door. The air conditioning hummed softly, a counterpoint to the city sounds filtering faintly from outside. The room had a large window offering a sliver of the city skyline, already twinkling with early evening lights. "Definitely better than an airport bench," I replied, trying to sound normal, as if I hadn't just had a minor existential crisis about bedding arrangements. "So, the bed situation?" I gestured vaguely at the offending piece of furniture. Leo turned, leaning against the dresser, his arms crossed. He had a relaxed posture that made him seem utterly at ease, even in this slightly absurd situation. "Right, the bed. I'm thinking, we're both adults. We can share, or one of us can take the floor, or we can see if they have a rollaway. What's your preference?" His gaze was direct, curious, but not pushy. I hesitated. The thought of a rollaway was practical, sensible, but somehow anticlimactic. And the thought of one of us on the floor felt unnecessary, almost rude. I'm fine sharing, if you are," I said, the words feeling a little foreign on my tongue. I hadn't shared a bed with anyone I wasn't intimately involved with in years. The idea of sharing one with a near stranger, especially one as attractive as Leo, was both daunting and strangely exhilarating. He grinned, a slow, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Great! Saves us a call to reception. We'll just have to establish a clear boundary down the middle, like a Berlin Wall of pillows." He chuckled. I found myself smiling back, genuinely. "Deal. I call the side with the lamp." "Too late," he said, pushing off the dresser and walking over to the right side of the bed. Already claimed it with my eyes. He threw his duffel onto the lamp side, effectively staking his claim. "You're a tyrant, Maxwell," I said, but there was no real heat in my voice. I walked to the other side, setting my smaller carry-on bag down. The tension, which had been tight as a drum, began to loosen, replaced by a thread of something lighter, an almost playful camaraderie. We spent the next few minutes unpacking essentials. I laid out a fresh t-shirt, a toothbrush, and a book on the bedside table. Leo, on his side, was less meticulous, just pulling out a crumpled shirt and a pair of shorts. He then rummaged in his bag and pulled out a small, worn, leather-bound journal. My lifeline, he explained, noticing my glance. Notes, thoughts, travel plans, the occasional existential doodle. Existential doodles? I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, sometimes you just need to draw a little spiral of despair. Helps release the pressure. He winked. But mostly, it's for work. I'm a freelance graphic designer, always jotting down ideas. That's cool, I said. I'm an architect, so lots of precise lines, less existential despair, usually. He laughed. Usually? So there are times you're tempted to sketch a little crying cloud over your blueprint? More like a collapsing skyscraper if the client is particularly challenging, I admitted, and we both laughed again. It was easy, this conversation, much easier than I'd anticipated. The initial stiffness was melting away. So, architect, huh? That explains the impeccable outfit on the flight, Leo teased. I was still wearing my travel clothes, dark jeans, a simple but well-fitting button-up shirt. And what about the freelance designer? I shot back. You looked like you rolled out of bed, but somehow still managed to look annoyingly put together. He was wearing a soft, well-worn t-shirt and cargo shorts, a style I'd never personally attempted, but which suited him perfectly. Ah, that's the secret of the freelancer. Controlled dishevelment. It's an art form, he declared, with mock seriousness. The conversation flowed easily from there. We talked about our work, the cities we lived in. He was based in Portland, I in San Francisco, and the reasons for our respective travels. I was on my way to a conference in New York, and he was heading home after a design project in Dallas. The mundane details of our lives slowly began to fill the space between us, turning us from strangers into something a little more substantial. "I'm starving," Leo announced suddenly, breaking into a story I was telling about a particularly challenging building foundation. Flight food did not cut it, and that stale pretzel from the airport kiosk was just insulting. "Agreed," I said, rubbing my own stomach. "Room service or venture out?" He looked out the window. "It's getting dark, and honestly, I've had enough navigating for one day. Room service sounds like pure indulgence." "My thoughts exactly," I said, grabbing the menu from the desk. We huddled over it, shoulders almost touching, discussing options. The menu was standard hotel fare, overpriced, but appealing after a long day. We settled on burgers and fries, with a shared slice of cheesecake for dessert. Because why not? If we were going to be stranded, we might as well do it comfortably. While we waited for the food, we migrated to the 2 armchairs near the window. Leo pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. "Any family you need to check in with?" he asked, glancing up. "My sister, mostly," I replied. "Just let her know I'm safe, but delayed. Parents are used to me being a bit of a wanderer." "Wanderer, huh? That fit your architecture career? Or do you design buildings that can be packed up and moved?" He grinned. "Only in my dreams," I said, chuckling. "No, I just mean I've always been drawn to new places, always moving. Before San Francisco, it was Seattle. Before that, Chicago. Never really stayed put for long." "Same," he mused, looking out at the city lights. "It's why freelancing works for me. As long as I have my laptop and an internet connection, I can be anywhere. Though Portland has a good vibe I keep coming back to." "Do you ever miss having a fixed address, a consistent routine?" I asked, realizing it was a question I often asked myself. He thought for a moment. "Sometimes. Especially when I'm dealing with taxes, or trying to explain my career path to my very traditional aunt. But then I think about being tied down and the thought just chafes. I like the freedom, the new experiences, the chance encounters." He glanced at me, and his eyes held a depth I hadn't noticed before, a quiet intensity that made my breath catch. "Like this one." "Like this one," I echoed, my voice a little softer than I intended. The casual ease of our conversation was giving way to something a bit more profound. a recognition of shared sensibilities. The knock on the door, announcing our room service, provided a welcome interruption, allowing me to gather my thoughts. The smell of sizzling patties and hot fries filled the room as the server rolled in a small table. We tipped him generously, and then, with a flourish, Leo pulled out the chairs. "Dinner is served, my liege," he announced, bowing dramatically. I laughed, feeling genuinely lighthearted for the first time all day. "Don't mind if I do, noble sir." We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the hunger taking precedence over conversation. But soon enough, the easy chatter resumed, fueled by good food and the increasingly relaxed atmosphere. We talked about travel stories, his disastrous backpacking trip through Southeast Asia, my unexpectedly moving visit to an ancient Roman ruin. We found common ground in our love for independent films and our mutual dislike for reality television. "So, do you have a partner back in San Francisco?" Leo asked, mid-story, about a particularly egregious design critique he'd received. His question was casual, delivered with a bite of his burger, but it landed with surprising impact. I paused, swallowing my mouthful. "No. No partner. Haven't for a while, actually." The truth felt a little raw, even to me. My last relationship had ended over a year ago, a slow fade fueled by different life paths and career ambitions. I hadn't really been looking for anything serious since. "You?" He shook his head. "Nah, my life's a bit too nomadic for a relationship right now. I've tried. It never ends well. People want stability, and I'm not exactly a rock." He gave a self-deprecating shrug. "Plus, I'm kinda picky. Takes a lot for someone to really hold my interest." My mind, despite myself, immediately started cataloging all the ways I might or might not be able to hold his interest. It was ridiculous. We were strangers, on a forced layover, sharing a hotel room. Yet the question had been asked, answered, and now the air hummed with a different kind of curiosity. "Picky in what way?" I asked, leaning forward, intrigued. He considered this, wiping a smudge of ketchup from his chin. "I don't know, someone who's got their own thing going on, passionate, smart, and I guess someone who can keep up with my terrible jokes." He smirked. "And good hands. I'm a sucker for good hands." My eyes involuntarily flickered down to my own hands, currently gripping a fry. Architect's hands, I supposed. Capable. Not particularly noteworthy. I felt a small, irrational pang of disappointment. "What about you, Miles?" he pressed, noticing my sudden quietness. "What do you look for?" I took a moment, truly thinking. I guess I appreciate someone who's genuine, open, someone who makes me laugh, and honestly, someone who isn't afraid to just be themselves. I've dated enough people who put on a performance. He nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Yeah, that's a big one. Authenticity. It's hard to find sometimes, isn't it?" "It really is," I agreed. We delved into a deeper conversation about the masks people wear, the expectations of society, and the struggle to remain true to oneself. It was the kind of conversation I usually reserved for my closest friends, not a man I'd met on a plane a few hours ago. But with Leo, it felt natural, easy, like peeling back layers one by one, revealing something a little more real underneath. The cheesecake arrived, a rich, creamy indulgence that we devoured slowly, the conversation winding down into comfortable silences punctuated by appreciative murmurs. The city lights outside seemed to have brightened, painting the window in vibrant hues. Eventually, the plates were cleared and the room service table rolled away. The silence that settled in was different from before. It was no longer awkward or expectant, but a quiet that felt full, weighted with the intimacy of shared stories and a surprising depth of connection. "Well," Leo said, stretching, "I think my brain has reached its maximum input capacity for one day." He stood, walked to the window, and looked out. His silhouette against the city lights was striking. I joined him, leaning my forearms on the window frame. The view was captivating. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" "Yeah," he murmured, his voice softer now. "Sometimes, when you're forced to stop, you actually get to appreciate things you usually rush past. He turned to me, his eyes reflecting the city glow. Today was unexpected. It really was, I agreed, meeting his gaze. There was a warmth there, a genuine curiosity that made me feel seen, truly seen, in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. My heart gave a little flutter, a nervous but excited rhythm. I should probably hit the gym, he said suddenly, breaking the spell, trying to keep some semblance of a routine, even when traveling. There's a gym? I asked, surprised. Usually. Let me check the hotel guide. He walked over to the desk, flipping through a small binder. Yep, lower level. You in? I considered it. I hadn't worked out in days, and the thought of burning off some of the day's stress and that cheesecake was appealing. Plus, another opportunity to spend time with Leo, even in the fluorescent lit confines of a hotel gym, didn't sound bad at all. Sure, why not? Give me 10 minutes to change. We met by the elevator a short while later, both in workout gear. I felt a little self-conscious in my somewhat faded athletic shorts and old t-shirt, but Leo just gave me a once-over and a reassuring nod. He was wearing sleek black shorts and a gray t-shirt that stretched across his shoulders in a way that made me appreciate the subtle strength underneath. The gym was small but well-equipped, mostly empty. We settled onto adjacent treadmills, setting a comfortable pace. The rhythm of our footsteps, the soft whir of the machines, and the quiet background music created a different kind of conversational space. We talked in shorter bursts now, about fitness routines, our favorite trails for running or hiking, and the importance of staying active when your job often involved sitting for hours. At one point, Leo turned his head, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. You have really good form, Miles, he commented, a genuine compliment. Looks like you know what you're doing. Years of practice, I said, feeling a flush of pride, and a competitive streak I can't quite shake. He chuckled. I can see that. I bet you're one of those people who finishes a marathon and then immediately signs up for another. Maybe not a marathon, I admitted, laughing, but definitely another 10K. After the treadmills, we moved to the free weights. I watched as Leo effortlessly lifted weights that looked heavier than mine, his muscles flexing under his t-shirt. There was an elegance to his strength, a controlled power that was surprisingly captivating. He caught me watching him once, and I quickly averted my gaze, feeling my cheeks warm. He just smiled, a small, knowing smile, and went back to his set. We finished our workout with some stretching. On the mats, side by side, the air was cooler, the exertion replaced by a satisfying ache in our muscles. The quiet felt companionable, a shared experience of pushing our bodies. That was good, Leo said, stretching his arms high above his head, his t-shirt riding up slightly to reveal a sliver of taut abdomen. My eyes lingered for a moment longer than they should have. Yeah, it was, I agreed, trying to sound normal. Thanks for the push. Anytime, Miles. Always good to have a workout, buddy. He held my gaze for a beat, and I felt a jolt. Was he just being friendly, or was there something else there? It was hard to tell with Leo. He was open, but also guarded in a way I hadn't quite deciphered yet. Back in the room, the atmosphere had subtly shifted. We'd shared a meal, intimate conversations, and now, a workout. There was a comfortable familiarity developing, a thread weaving us together. Shower first? I offered, gesturing towards the bathroom. You go ahead, I'll chill for a bit, he said, collapsing onto his side of the bed. He pulled out his journal again, flipping through pages. I took a quick, hot shower, letting the water wash away the day's grime and some of the lingering uncertainty. When I emerged, wrapped in a fluffy hotel towel, Leo was still on the bed, sketching something. The scent of soap and shampoo followed me. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. All yours, he said, indicating the bathroom. I'll be quick. He placed his journal carefully on the bedside table. I nodded, feeling a little self-conscious in my towel. I quickly rummaged for my pajamas. A simple t-shirt and boxer briefs. I slipped them on, feeling more comfortable. By the time Leo emerged from the bathroom, fresh and smelling faintly of a citrusy body wash, I was settled on my side of the bed, reading my book. He paused by his side, looking at the neatly made bed, then at me. "So, the Berlin Wall of pillows?" he asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. I looked up, meeting his eyes. He was wearing just a pair of dark gray athletic shorts, his torso bare. My gaze lingered for a fraction of a second on his chest, broad and toned, before quickly flicking back to his face. "I was thinking about it," I admitted, "but felt it might be a bit aggressive." He chuckled, a low, warm sound. "Fair enough, we can go for a demilitarized zone instead." Mutual respect for boundaries. He slid into bed, pulling the duvet up to his waist. The space between us felt electric, charged with unspoken possibility. It was just a bed, just two men, but the circumstances made it feel like so much more. The city hummed outside, a distant, muffled symphony. I went back to my book, but my eyes kept darting to Leo. He wasn't reading, just lying on his back, staring up at the ceiling, one arm tucked behind his head. He seemed lost in thought, a faraway look in his eyes. "What are you thinking about?" I asked, unable to resist. He turned his head slowly, meeting my gaze. "Just everything. How weird today was. How strange it is to be here, with you, a complete stranger, and feel like it's not strange at all." He paused. "Does that make sense?" "It does," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "It makes perfect sense. I was thinking the same thing." A comfortable silence settled between us again, but this time it was deeper, more meaningful. It wasn't the silence of strangers or the silence of awkwardness, but the silence of two people recognizing a burgeoning connection, a fragile, beautiful thing forming in the most unexpected of circumstances. "You know," Leo said, breaking the silence again, his voice soft, "I usually hate travel delays. They always throw my schedule off, make me irritable. But today feels different." He turned his body slightly, propping himself up on an elbow, facing me. "I'm actually kind of glad for it." My heart skipped a beat. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. I could feel the warmth of his gaze, the quiet intensity in his eyes. It was a potent combination. I am too, Leo," I admitted, my voice equally quiet. I found myself mirroring his posture, propping myself on my elbow, facing him across the expanse of the king bed. The distance between us suddenly felt both vast and negligible. His eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled, a gentle, almost shy smile that was entirely different from his earlier confident grin. It was a smile that spoke of vulnerability, and it disarmed me completely. "So," he began, his voice a low murmur, "tell me more about these collapsing skyscrapers of yours. Is it purely structural failure, or is there usually a dramatic architectural flourish to the demise?" I laughed, a soft, relieved sound. He was giving us an out, pulling back from the precipice of intense emotion, back into the comfort of conversation. And I was grateful for it. For now. The night was still young, in a way. The forced intimacy of the shared room, the unexpected connection, it was all still unfolding. I launched into a story about a particularly memorable design flaw, feeling the tension ease but the awareness of him, just across from me, remaining as potent as ever. We talked until our voices grew hoarse, until the city outside quieted to a low hum, until the early morning light began to faintly gray the edges of the curtains. It felt like a lifetime of conversations, compressed into a single night. We talked about art, about politics, about our childhoods, about our biggest fears and our wildest dreams. We discovered shared passions for obscure bands, for spicy food, for the smell of old books. Each revelation, each shared laugh, each moment of quiet understanding was another brick in the bridge being built between us. At some point, the conversation tapered off into comfortable exhaustion. We had shifted positions, now lying on our backs again, staring at the ceiling, the space between us no longer a void, but a shared silence, rich with the threads of our newly woven connection. "I guess we should try to get some sleep," I said, my voice raspy with tiredness, the words feeling almost like a reluctant farewell to the night. "Yeah," Leo agreed, a sigh in his voice. Morning's gonna come too soon. He turned onto his side, facing away from me, settling deeper into the pillows. I did the same, turning my back to him, but the awareness of him, just inches away, was still incredibly strong. My mind replayed snippets of our conversations, his expressions, the sound of his laugh. This wasn't just a travel story. This felt like the beginning of something significant. As sleep finally began to claim me, my last thought was of the king bed, the shared space, and the unexpected gift of this unplanned delay. I drifted off, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the hotel's climate control and everything to do with Leo Maxwell. The soft, unfamiliar hum of the air conditioning was the first thing that registered when I woke. It was a stark contrast to the thrum of the airplane engine that had lulled me to sleep for so many hours, and even more so to the quiet intimacy that had settled over this room just a few hours earlier. My eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the muted light filtering through the thick curtains. For a brief, disorienting moment, I wasn't sure where I was. Then the memory of the past 24 hours flooded back, bringing with it a warmth that spread through my chest, chasing away the remnants of sleep. Liam was still asleep beside me. His breathing was even, a low, steady rhythm that spoke of deep, peaceful slumber. He was on his side, facing me, one arm flung out as if in search of something, or someone, in the night. His hair, a slightly unruly brown, fell across his forehead, softened by the morning light. I found myself just watching him, a quiet fascination taking hold. It wasn't just physical attraction, though he possessed an undeniably appealing combination of strength and a certain gentle vulnerability. It was the way his presence had so easily filled the space, not just in this room, but in my previously solitary journey. It was the ease of our conversation, the surprising depth we'd reached so quickly, the shared laughter, and then the quiet understanding that had blossomed in the dwindling hours of the night. My mind replayed snippets of our conversation, the confessions exchanged in hushed tones, the comfortable silences. I remembered the feeling of his hand on mine, a casual gesture that had felt anything but. And then, the kiss. It had been gentle, exploratory, a question more than a declaration, but it had resonated through me like a tuning fork, vibrating with a potential I hadn't dared to acknowledge in a long time. It wasn't the passionate, movie scene kind of kiss, but it was profoundly real, tasting of toothpaste and anticipation, a soft promise whispered between us in the pre-dawn quiet. A tiny smile touched my lips, unbidden. It was absurd, really. A chance encounter, a diverted flight, a shared hotel room. The stuff of romantic comedies, not my usually meticulously planned, somewhat predictable life. My life had been orderly, if a little quiet, since my last significant relationship had sputtered out almost 2 years ago. I'd told myself I was fine, that I enjoyed my independence, that the timing wasn't right for anything serious, and it had been true to an extent. I hadn't felt a void. Not until Liam had appeared, a whirlwind of genuine curiosity and understated charm, showing me that perhaps the space I thought was full was merely dormant. He stirred then, a soft groan escaping his lips as he stretched, his muscles subtly shifting beneath the thin sheet. My gaze quickly shifted to the ceiling, a sudden shyness washing over me. How do you navigate the morning after such an unexpected yet undeniably significant event with someone you barely know yet feel you've known for ages? What were the rules? Were there any? My heart gave a little flutter, a nervous butterfly trapped in my rib cage. Morning. Liam's voice was a low rumble, still thick with sleep. He sounded normal, comforting. I turned my head back towards him, trying to project an air of calm I didn't entirely feel. Morning, I replied, my voice a little rougher than I intended. He blinked a few times, clearing the last vestiges of sleep, and then his eyes met mine. There was a moment of mutual assessment, a quiet question passing between us. His eyes, a warm hazel, held a gentle curiosity, a mirroring of the uncertainty I felt. But there was also a spark. a shared memory of the night that warmed them. "Sleep okay?" he asked, pushing himself up onto an elbow, the sheet slipping slightly, revealing the smooth plane of his chest. I swallowed, trying to focus on his face. "Yeah, surprisingly well," I admitted, a small laugh escaping me. "Considering," he chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. "Considering everything, it was a night." "It was," I agreed, letting the words hang in the air, allowing their unspoken implications to settle. We both knew everything, and a night referred to more than just the delayed flight and the hotel. It referred to us. He reached out, his fingers tracing a light path along the top of my arm, sending a jolt of awareness through me. It was a simple touch, yet it felt loaded, confirming the reality of what had transpired. "No regrets?" he asked, his voice softer now, his gaze steady on mine. The question hung there, delicate and vulnerable. My instinct, honed over years of self-preservation, was to equivocate, to make light of it. But looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine openness there, I found myself unable to. "No," I said, meeting his gaze squarely. "No regrets at all." A slow smile spread across his face, easing the tension I hadn't fully realized I was holding. "Good," he breathed, the single word carrying a surprising weight of relief. He leaned in then, just slightly, and brushed his lips against mine. It was quicker than the kiss from last night, a soft affirmation, a quiet hello to the morning. This time there was no question in it, only a tender certainty. We spent a few minutes just lying there, not talking, just being. The comfortable silence had returned, but it felt different now, imbued with a new layer of understanding. It was a silence filled with unspoken questions about the future, about how this sudden, intense connection could possibly fit into our separate lives. Eventually, the practicalities of the day started to assert themselves. My stomach rumbled softly. Liam chuckled again. "Sounds like someone's ready for breakfast." "Guilty," I said, pushing myself up into a sitting position. "I usually don't sleep in this late." "Me neither," he replied, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "But I'm not complaining. This was a better alarm clock than my phone." He gestured vaguely at me with a grin, and I felt a blush creep up my neck. We moved around the room, a dance of careful politeness and lingering intimacy. Showering felt like an act of separation, even though we knew we'd be meeting again. I chose my clothes with more care than usual, wishing I had something a little less wrinkled from the suitcase. While I dressed, I heard Liam on his phone in the other corner of the room, speaking in hushed tones, presumably sorting out his own travel arrangements. The reality of our imminent departure pressed in. When he finished, he turned to me, a slightly more serious expression on his face. "Okay, so it looks like our flight is rescheduled for this afternoon, around 2. Means we have a bit of time for breakfast, maybe explore the hotel, if you're up for it, before heading back to the airport." "Sounds like a plan," I agreed, trying to keep my voice light, masking the sudden pang of disappointment that a bit of time was all we had left. We went down to the hotel restaurant, a brightly lit space filled with the murmur of other delayed passengers. It felt strange, almost jarring, to be back among so many people after the cocoon of our room. We found a quiet table in a corner. Over eggs and coffee, the conversation flowed easily again, but with a new undercurrent. The topics were lighter, less emotionally charged than our late-night confessions, but every now and then our eyes would meet, and a flicker of the intense connection we'd forged would pass between us. I learned more about his work as an architect, about his passion for sustainable design, and his dreams of building a house by the ocean someday. He asked about my work in marketing, my love for photography, and my quiet ambition to one day publish a collection of my landscape shots. We filled in the practical gaps, layering them onto the emotional foundation we'd already laid. It felt important, a way of grounding what felt ethereal. "So, where are you headed once you land?" Liam asked, stirring his coffee. "Back to my apartment in the city," I replied, naming a major metropolis a few states away. "And then straight back to work on Monday." He nodded. "And you?" I asked. Home to the suburbs outside the city, he said, naming a suburb equidistant from my city and his own. Got a big project kicking off next week, going to be a busy few months. The distance hung between us, a silent challenge. We were traveling in the same general direction, but our destinations, our lives, were distinctly separate. The realization landed with a dull thud in my stomach. This wasn't a rom-com where we suddenly discovered we lived in the same building or were working on the same project. This was real life, with real distances and real responsibilities. "It's a shame, isn't it?" Liam said, almost reading my thoughts. "To meet someone like this under such strange circumstances and then just go back to normal." "It is," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "It feels like we're being pulled apart just as we've found our stride." He reached across the table, his hand covering mine briefly, a comforting weight. "Hey," he said, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "It doesn't have to be the end, Miles. Unless you want it to be." My breath hitched. His directness was both disarming and exhilarating. He was giving me an out, but also offering a lifeline. I don't want it to be," I confessed, my voice regaining strength. The thought of walking away from this, from him, felt like tearing something vital from myself. "Good," he said, that slow, confident smile returning, "because I definitely don't either." He squeezed my hand lightly before retracting his. "We'll figure it out, won't we?" "We will," I promised, a rush of optimism filling me. The certainty in his gaze was infectious. After breakfast, we took a short walk around the hotel grounds. The air was crisp and clear, a bright autumn morning that felt almost too perfect for the internal turmoil I was experiencing. We talked about everything and nothing, finding humor in the absurdity of our situation and stealing glances that held deeper meaning. Each shared moment felt precious, tinged with the knowledge that our temporary bubble was about to burst. The bus ride back to the airport was quieter, a different kind of quiet from the hotel room. It was the quiet of anticipation, of unspoken farewells looming. We sat close, our knees occasionally brushing, a silent reassurance that we were still there, still together, for now. The airport was bustling, a stark contrast to the relative calm of the hotel. Checking in, going through security, these mundane tasks felt like monumental hurdles, each one bringing us closer to separation. We didn't talk much as we navigated the crowds, but every now and then Liam would glance at me, a question in his eyes, or a small, reassuring smile. I felt a sense of dread growing in my stomach, a knot of anxiety tightening with each step. When we finally found our gate, it was a relief, but also a signal. Our names were called, the boarding process began. Passengers formed lines, eager to finally reach their destinations. Liam and I exchanged a look. This was it. "Well," he began, a slight awkwardness entering his voice, a mirror of my own internal struggle. "This is where we part ways, I guess." "Looks like it," I managed, my throat feeling tight. "It was a pleasure, Miles," he said, extending his hand. His touch, even in this formal gesture, was warm and firm. "The pleasure was all mine, Liam," I replied, squeezing his hand. I wanted to say more, to reach out, to ask for something concrete, but the words felt trapped. He held my gaze for a beat longer than necessary, a silent message passing between us. Then, with a decisive nod, he said, "I'll text you." It wasn't a question, it was a promise, a simple statement that meant everything. "Please do," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes, and then, with a final, lingering look, he turned and walked down the jet bridge, disappearing into the plane. I stood there for a moment, watching the gate agent close the door, a surreal feeling washing over me. He was gone, just like that. The suddenness of it left me feeling hollowed out, as if a vital part of me had just been detached. It was only when a ground staff member politely asked me to step aside that I realized I was still standing in the middle of the boarding area, staring blankly at the closed door. My own gate was a few terminals over. The walk felt infinitely longer than it had before. Each step felt heavy, burdened by the absence of his presence beside me. I pulled out my phone, checking it compulsively, even though I knew it was too soon. No new messages. Of course not. He was probably still settling into his seat. The flight home was a blur. I tried to distract myself with a book, with a movie, but my mind kept drifting back to Liam. To his laugh, to the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, to the comforting weight of his hand, to the surprising tenderness of his kiss. Every sensation, every memory was vivid, etched sharply in my mind. It felt like I was carrying a secret, precious cargo that no one else knew about. When I finally landed, the familiar chill of my home city wrapped around me, a stark contrast to the warmth I'd experienced. The air felt colder, the pace of life faster, more impersonal. I took a taxi to my apartment, the familiar streets flashing by, each one seeming to judge my new, altered state. My apartment, usually a sanctuary, felt empty. The silence was deafening, amplified by the sudden void where Liam's presence had been. I unpacked mechanically, folding clothes, putting things away, my movements automatic. But my thoughts were anything but. They circled around Liam, around the promise he'd made. "I'll text you." Had he meant it? Or was it just a polite goodbye, a way to soften the inevitable parting? My cynical side, a well-developed defense mechanism, started to whisper doubts. It had been an intense, isolated bubble of an experience. Maybe it wouldn't translate to the real world. Maybe the spark would dissipate under the harsh light of distance and daily life. I grabbed my phone, fingers hovering over the screen. Should I text him first? Reaching out felt both exhilarating and terrifying. What if he hadn't meant it? What if he was already moving on, dismissing our encounter as a pleasant diversion? The vulnerability of it was almost paralyzing. I put the phone down, pacing my living room. I usually prided myself on my composure, my ability to rationally assess situations. But this felt different. It wasn't a business decision, a marketing strategy. It was raw, emotional, deeply personal. My heart was thumping a restless rhythm against my ribs. I made myself a cup of tea, trying to restore some semblance of normalcy to my evening routine. As I sipped the warm liquid, I looked around my apartment, a space I had carefully curated to reflect my tastes and comfort. It was a good apartment, a good life. But now, after Liam, it felt incomplete. A sudden, sharp realization hit me. I hadn't realized how lonely I had become until someone had made me feel less so. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant sounds of city traffic. I stared at my phone, willing it to light up. Every ping, every notification from other apps sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, only to deflate when it wasn't him. The wait was agonizing, a slow burn of anticipation and anxiety. It wasn't until later that evening, when I was contemplating cooking a lonely dinner, that my phone finally buzzed with a message notification from an unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. "Hey Miles, Liam here. Hope you got home safely." A wave of profound relief washed over me, so intense it almost brought tears to my eyes. He remembered. He texted. It wasn't just a fleeting encounter, not just a polite parting remark. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed out my reply, a genuine smile spreading across my face for the first time since leaving the airport. "Hey Liam, I did, thanks. Just got in. Glad to hear from you." I hit send, a feeling of hope unfurling in my chest. The ball was now in his court again, but the initial, terrifying hurdle had been cleared. The possibility, however faint, of something real, something lasting, hadn't vanished with the closing of a plane door. It was still there, a delicate seedling, pushing its way through the concrete of distance and uncertainty. Minutes later, another buzz. "Good. The flight was long without you there. Just checking into my place now. Crazy how quiet it is after our little adventure." My smile widened. "Tell me about it." My apartment feels like an echo chamber. Haha, an echo chamber of possibilities? I paused, rereading his last message. An echo chamber of possibilities. He was subtly probing, asking for more, inviting me to explore this budding connection. This wasn't just small talk, it was a continuation of the conversation we'd started in the hotel room, a quiet acknowledgement that what we had wasn't confined to those four walls. Maybe, I typed back, a newfound confidence bubbling up, definitely an echo chamber of wondering what happens next. It was a bold move for me, laying my cards on the table, even partially. But something about Liam, something about the intensity of our shared experience, pushed me to be more open, more vulnerable than I typically allowed myself to be. The fear of potential disappointment was still there, a familiar companion, but it was overshadowed by a far more potent emotion, the exhilarating hope that this wasn't just a fleeting encounter, but the unexpected beginning of something truly special. I waited for his reply, my heart beating a steady, hopeful rhythm. The journey had ended, but a new one, far more uncertain and exciting, felt like it was just beginning. The hotel room walls were gone, but the connection we'd built there, delicate yet resilient, was still standing, ready to face the world beyond. And for the first time in a long time, the prospect of what came next didn't fill me with dread, but with a quiet, undeniable thrill. The world outside the hotel walls suddenly seemed full of promise. The silence of my own apartment hit differently after I got back. Not the peaceful, welcome silence I usually cherished, but an empty, echoing kind. It was a stark contrast to the shared quiet of that hotel room, filled with unspoken understanding and the comforting hum of Liam's presence. I unpacked, or rather, I dumped my suitcase in the corner and stared at it for a good 10 minutes, the memory of Liam's laugh still a vibrant thing in my mind. My phone buzzed. It was him. A simple text. Made it back safe? You? A wave of relief washed over me. It felt good, knowing he was thinking of me, checking in. I typed back, just walked in, exhausted, but good. How was your connection? We'd said our goodbyes at different gates, a hurried, slightly awkward embrace that still managed to feel like the most natural thing in the world. We'd promised to talk, to figure things out, but the logistics of things felt like a monumental task from a distance. The next few weeks became a delicate dance of texts, calls, and eventually video chats. Our schedules were a mess. Different time zones, demanding jobs. I was swamped with the new graphic design project that had initially sent me on that ill-fated or perhaps fate-filled flight. Liam, with his academic schedule, had his own whirlwind of lectures and research, but we made it work. We squeezed in calls during my lunch break, his late evenings. We sent voice notes when a proper call was impossible, sharing snippets of our days, mundane observations that somehow felt profound because they were for each other. It was strange, building a relationship this way. There was no casual dinner date, no popping over to his place for a movie, none of the typical steps. Instead, it was an accelerated intimacy built on shared words, vulnerable confessions whispered across miles. We talked about everything: our families, our pasts, our dreams, the fear of flying, the bizarre brilliance of that hotel room encounter. I found myself opening up to Liam in ways I hadn't dared with anyone before. He had a way of listening that made you feel utterly seen, utterly safe. He never judged, only offered thoughtful insights and quiet empathy. One evening, during a particularly long video call, Liam was telling me about a student's surprisingly insightful essay on post-colonial literature. I was sketching idly on my tablet, half listening, half just soaking in the sight of him. The way his brow furrowed when he explained complex ideas, the easy smile that crept onto his face when he remembered something funny. He paused, catching my eye. "Miles, are you even listening?" he teased, a playful glint in his eyes. I grinned. Every word. Just enjoying the view. He chuckled, a warm sound that always made something inside me settle. Smooth, Miles. Very smooth. Hey, I'm serious. You have no idea how much I look forward to these calls. My day feels incomplete without them." His expression softened. "I know the feeling. It's strange, isn't it? To feel so connected to someone you only just met and barely even spent time with in person." "It's more than just meeting, Liam. It was an immersion, like being dropped into the deep end of a pool and realizing you could breathe underwater." I paused, searching for the right words. "I haven't felt this way in a long time, maybe ever." He looked thoughtful. "I understand. It's like we skipped all the small talk and went straight to the soul stuff. And the soul stuff, it fits." That night, after we hung up, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The soul stuff. It fits. It did. But what did that mean for real life? My last serious relationship had been a slow, painful unraveling. Mark and I had been together for 5 years, a comfortable partnership that eventually suffocated under unspoken expectations and differing life paths. When it ended, I'd sworn off anything that felt too complicated, too demanding. And here I was, hurtling headfirst into a long-distance whirlwind romance with a man I'd spent less than 48 hours with. It felt reckless, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. My friends, when I cautiously brought him up, were intrigued and a little skeptical. "You met him how?" Chloe asked, wide-eyed over our weekly brunch. "And you shared a hotel room? Miles, you usually wouldn't even share your dessert." I laughed. "It was unusual circumstances, and it wasn't like that. We just talked. A lot." I tried to explain the depth of connection, the surprising ease, but words felt inadequate. How do you convey the magic of a forced, unexpected intimacy to someone who hasn't experienced it? "So, are you going to see him again?" Ben asked, ever the pragmatist. "We're talking about it. It's complicated with the distance." I sighed. "I don't know. I really like him, guys. More than like. But I'm scared." "Scared of what?" Chloe prodded gently. "Scared of everything. Scared it won't be the same. Scared of the effort. Scared of getting hurt again. Scared of what it means if it is real. Because if it's real, it changes everything." My voice was barely a whisper. Their silence was understanding. They knew my history. They knew how deeply I'd been affected by the breakup with Mark. I'd built up walls, become proficient at keeping people at arm's length. Liam, it seemed, had casually strolled through them as if they were made of mist. The weeks turned into months. Our remote communication became the backbone of my emotional life. We started doing things together, virtually. We'd cook dinner on video call, sharing recipes, and laughing at my culinary mishaps. We'd watch movies simultaneously, texting reactions back and forth. It was a beautiful, tender way to cultivate a relationship, but the ache for physical presence grew stronger with each passing day. The simple touch, a casual lean, a shared breath. Those were missing pieces. One Friday, after a particularly grueling week at work, I was sprawled on my couch, scrolling through my phone. I saw a picture Liam had posted on his social media. A beautiful sunset over a lake, taken near his university campus. My chest tightened with a pang of longing. I wanted to be there by that lake with him. I picked up my phone and called him. He answered almost immediately, his voice warm and tired. "Hey you, rough day?" "Yeah, just one of those. How's your week been?" He told me about a challenging lecture, a breakthrough in his research. He made it sound engaging, even though I knew nothing about Renaissance poetry. I listened, my eyes closed, just picturing him. "I miss you," I blurted out, before I could second-guess myself. A beat of silence, then, softly, "I miss you too, Miles. More than I can say." Is this sustainable, Liam?" The question hung in the air, heavy and fragile. "This long-distance thing? Just talking on screens?" He sighed. "It's hard. It's definitely hard. But I don't want to give up on us. Do you?" "No, God, no. I don't want to give up. It's just, I feel like I'm in this limbo, you know? Like my life is here, but a huge part of my heart is over there." "I know," he said, his voice laced with understanding. I feel it too. Every time I see a couple holding hands or just sharing a quiet moment, I think of you. I think about what we could have. So what can we have? I pressed, my heart pounding. This was it, the conversation we'd been circling for weeks. Another pause. We need to see each other, Miles, properly. It's been too long. We need to know if this magic still holds when we're not just pixels on a screen. He was right. Of course, he was right. The bubble of the hotel room had been unique, but real life had its own tests. Could we recreate that connection, or even build upon it, outside of that isolated space? Could our day-to-day selves truly mesh? I want to, I said, my voice thick with emotion. More than anything. But when? And how? He suggested a weekend in a neutral city, halfway between us. A place neither of us had any prior connection to, a new beginning. The idea was brilliant. It felt less pressured than one of us flying into the other's established life. It would be our shared space again, just like that hotel room, but this time, chosen. Planning the trip was an exciting distraction. We picked a city with good museums and great food. We booked separate rooms in the same boutique hotel, a silent acknowledgement of caution, a respect for the pace we'd set. This wasn't a desperate leap. It was a carefully considered step. As the date approached, my anxiety levels skyrocketed. What if I'd built him up too much in my head? What if the reality couldn't live up to the fantasy? What if all that soul-bearing over video calls somehow diluted the spark we'd found in person? I'd caught myself rereading our old texts, trying to find reassurance, but all I found was my own escalating worry. This was it. The real test. The flight to our chosen city felt interminable. I clutched my boarding pass, my palms sweating. When I landed and retrieved my luggage, I felt a familiar surge of panic. What if he's changed his mind? What if I'm an idiot for flying all this way? Then my phone buzzed. A picture of Liam, standing outside the arrival gate, a slightly nervous but utterly charming smile on his face. He'd arrived earlier and was waiting for me. My breath hitched. He looked exactly the same, but somehow even better, more real than the pixels. "Miles!" he exclaimed, his voice ringing with genuine warmth as I approached. He covered the distance between us in a few long strides, pulling me into a hug that felt like coming home. It wasn't a tentative, polite hug. It was firm, comforting, and lasted a long time. I buried my face in his shoulder, inhaling his familiar, comforting scent. "Liam," I whispered, my voice rough with emotion. "You're real." He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "And you are too. Thank God." He squeezed my hand. "Come on, let's get you to the hotel." The initial awkwardness quickly melted away. We talked easily on the ride to the hotel, catching up on the small details of our journey, just like old friends. Once we checked in and dropped off our bags in our respective rooms, we met in the lobby. "So," Liam said, a mischievous glint in his eyes, "fancy getting some actual food? Or would you prefer a quick, intense discussion about the meaning of life over airport coffee?" I laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place of genuine joy. "Food, please. My stomach thinks my throat has been cut." We walked, side by side, through the bustling city streets. It was exhilarating, the simple act of existing in the same physical space. My hand brushed against his, and I felt a spark, a jolt of electricity that sent warmth through me. He intertwined his fingers with mine, a silent affirmation. Dinner was wonderful. We picked a cozy Italian place, sharing a bottle of wine and plates of pasta. The conversation flowed effortlessly, just as it did on our calls, but enhanced by the immediate feedback of his expressions, the way his eyes would light up, the warmth of his hand still occasionally finding mine under the table. It wasn't just the words anymore. It was the entire sensory experience. The subtle scent of his cologne, the sound of his actual laugh filling the space, the genuine warmth in his gaze. Later, walking back to the hotel under a sky peppered with stars, we found ourselves pausing in a quiet park. The air was cool, crisp. "This is nice," I said, looking up at the sky. "It is," Liam agreed, pulling me closer so our shoulders touched. "It's everything I hoped it would be." I turned to him, my heart in my throat. "Me too." I searched his eyes, needing to know, "Liam, is this still real for you? Like it was in the hotel?" He reached out, cupping my cheek gently. His thumb brushed over my skin. "Miles, it's more real. Because it's here, now, in our real lives, and it still feels like home. Like your home." His words, simple and profound, shattered the last of my lingering doubts. I leaned into his touch, my eyes welling up. "God, Liam." He leaned in, his gaze tender, and kissed me. It wasn't the hesitant, exploratory kiss of that first night. This was a kiss of confirmation, of deep longing and shared understanding. It was soft at first, then deepened, conveying all the weeks of anticipation, all the unspoken emotions. My arms went around his waist, pulling him closer until there was no space left between us. His hands tangled in my hair, holding me steady as the world around us faded. When we finally broke apart, breathless, I rested my forehead against his. "I think I might be falling in love with you," I confessed, the words tumbling out before I could censor them. Liam's smile was radiant. "Good," he whispered, his voice thick, "because I'm already there." We spent the rest of the weekend exploring the city, but mostly exploring each other. We walked hand in hand through art galleries, debated interpretations over coffee, and simply sat in comfortable silence, savoring the presence of the other. We talked about our future, cautiously at first, then with increasing openness. The distance was still a formidable obstacle, but it no longer felt insurmountable. It felt like a challenge we could face, together. On Sunday evening, before our flights back to our respective lives, we were having one last dinner. The atmosphere was tinged with a familiar bittersweetness, but this time it was laced with a hopeful resolve. "So," I began, swirling the last of my wine, "what's the plan then? We can't just go back to endless video calls, can we?" Liam's eyes met mine, serious and determined. "No, we can't. This weekend has proven that. We need more." He reached across the table, taking my hand. "I've been thinking, Miles, about my research, my work. There are opportunities in your city. Not immediate, but definitely possible. It would mean a lot of work, a lot of change, but I think I want to try." My heart leaped into my throat. "You're serious?" "I'm deadly serious. I wouldn't just uproot my life for anyone, but for you, for us. I want to try." He squeezed my hand. "I'm not saying it'll be easy or quick, but I want to actively work towards being in the same place. Does that sound terrifying?" I stared at him, my mind reeling. This was huge. This was a commitment, a true indication of how deeply he felt. It was terrifying, yes, but also incredibly exhilarating. "It sounds like everything I've ever wanted, but was too scared to admit," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It sounds like hope." His smile was gentle. "Good, because that's exactly what it is for me too." We talked for hours that night, outlining a tentative timeline, discussing the practicalities, the risks. It wouldn't happen overnight. There would be more visits, more remote planning, more challenging conversations. But for the first time, our future together felt tangible, like a path laid out before us, rather than a wistful dream. The goodbye at the airport the next morning was still hard, but it was different. There was no uncertainty, no lingering doubt about whether we would see each other again. There was a promise, a shared vision. We held each other for a long moment, a silent pact sealed between us. "I'll call you when I land," he murmured, against my hair. "You better," I replied, my voice thick, "and don't you dare forget about us." He pulled back, his eyes sparkling. "Never. Not a chance, Miles. He gave me one last lingering kiss, full of the promise of future touches, future nights, a future shared. Walking away from him this time, the separation still stung, but it was overshadowed by a profound sense of peace. The empty apartment I returned to no longer felt quite so empty. It was now a place filled with memories of Liam and the exciting anticipation of his eventual arrival. The long flight had indeed led me to a hotel room with my seatmate, but it had also, unexpectedly, led me to a place in my life I never thought I'd reach again, a place of open-hearted vulnerability, of daring to hope, of landing, finally, in love. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this journey had only just begun.